Imagine being the president of a sovereign nation. You are sitting at a high-stakes negotiating table,
Right.
and you agree to a peace framework to stop the bombardment of your cities. You reach for the pen to sign. But, and really everyone at the table knows your signature means absolutely nothing.
Because you don't actually hold the power.
Exactly, because an entirely separate, heavily armed organization operating inside your borders holds the actual veto power. And, well, they are refusing to sign.
It's a fascinating and incredibly dangerous dynamic.
It really is. Well, good morning. Today is June 9, 2026.
But-
The region is the Middle East, specifically Lebanon. And our title for today's briefing is Israel-Hezbollah and the Battle for Southern Lebanon.
Good morning.
Before we begin our analysis, a quick note on our intelligence sourcing. Today's deep dive is brought to you by ProWave AI, and all the intelligence we are discussing is generated entirely by Stylo News.
Which is an incredible platform.
It is. Stylo News is the AI-powered news application that serves as the consumer version of the Stylo Intel Ops software. That enterprise software is currently utilized across government, military, and business sectors globally.
So it's serious hardware. Or software, rather.
Right, exactly. What this means for you, the listener, is that you are getting unique, unvarnished access to an intelligence tool designed specifically to support global decision makers.
You're seeing the same data they are.
Precisely. Now, our mission for this deep dive is to impartially unpack the primary patterns of events over the past 2 weeks. We'll examine the impacts at the local, national, and international levels, identify the perspectives of key decision makers, and, forecast potential courses of action.
And we're doing all this while maintaining strict neutrality.
Absolutely. We are delivering the mechanics of the situation exactly as they are without generating fear.
The objective here is absolute clarity. We want to understand the mechanisms driving a highly complex operational environment.
Okay, let's unpack this. If we look at the timeline from late May into early June 2026, we are looking at the total mechanical failure of the mid-April ceasefire.
Total failure. We've moved way past localized cross-border friction now.
Right. It's now a sustained, multidimensional military campaign. So let's look at the actual ground realities. What are we seeing on the map right now?
Well, the satellite imagery and operational data reflect a massive shift in military posture. I mean, over the past 14 days, Israeli ground forces have advanced significantly.
They've pushed quite far north, right?
Yes, they've crossed both the Litani and Zaorani rivers, and they have also captured historical high ground points, most notably Beaufort Castle.
Yeah, and simultaneously, Israeli airstrikes have expanded their geographic scope, moving northward and penetrating deeply into Beirut's southern suburbs, an area known as Dahiya.
Right.
I want to stop right there and explain why these specific locations matter, because they aren't just, random coordinates on a map.
No, they're incredibly strategic.
Right. The Litani River, for instance, is about 30 kilometers north of the Israeli border. Historically and strategically, the Litani is the definitive red line for Israeli security.
Right. It's the geographic boundary established by UN Security Council Resolution 1701 back in 2006.
Exactly. And Beaufort Castle isn't just some historical tourist site. It sits on this massive cliff overlooking the Litani.
Whoever holds that castle commands the line of sight for artillery across the entire southern sector. It's a huge tactical advantage.
Yeah, that geographic dominance is the entire point of the current operation. But on the opposing side, Hezbollah's operational capability remains, frankly, highly persistent.
It does. They're maintaining heavy rocket fire against military targets and communities in northern Israel. But more notably, they are extensively deploying these FPV Ababil drones.
And for anyone unfamiliar with the technical jargon there, FPV stands for first-person view. We aren't talking about massive, multi-million-dollar military aircraft here.
No, not at all.
These are essentially cheap, highly maneuverable drones strapped with explosives, piloted by an operator wearing virtual reality goggles.
And the reason these are so strategically significant is that they fly low, they fly slow, and they don't have the massive thermal signature of a traditional rocket.
Which means they can often bypass advanced air defense systems like the Iron Dome.
Exactly, they slip right under the radar.
And objectively reporting the toll here, the human impact of this exchange is severe. Lebanon has seen over 3,500 fatalities since the wider conflict began.
It's devastating.
We are looking at the systemic destruction of civilian infrastructure, including hospitals and water treatment facilities. This is particularly intense in southern cities like Tyre and Nabatea.
And the displacement crisis is staggering. We've crossed a massive threshold. Over 1 million civilians have been forced to evacuate.
Over a million. But, looking at Israel's military movements crossing the Litani, taking Beaufort, I have to push back a bit on the underlying strategy here. Israel tried to maintain a physical buffer zone in southern Lebanon for 15 years prior to the year 2000, and it ended in a grueling war of attrition that arguably empowered Hezbollah in the first place.
That's a varied historical parallel.
Right. So, mechanically speaking, how is this current escalation any different? It feels like a controlled burn that is dangerously close to jumping the fire line. Is this a temporary tactical maneuver, or are they trying to permanently redraw the regional security map again?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, the intelligence assessment suggests this is not intended as a permanent occupation.
Okay, so what is it then?
It's a coercive transition phase. This is no longer a contained border dispute. It is a contested implementation phase
Implementation of what?
of a new security reality. The mechanism here is maximum pressure. Israel is utilizing overwhelming military force to physically create a sanitized buffer zone, neutralizing the immediate threat of Hezbollah's short-range projectiles and drone swarms.
So they are trying to enforce kinematically what diplomacy couldn't.
Exactly. They are attempting to enforce, via kinetic military action, the security perimeter that the April diplomatic ceasefire completely failed to secure.
But if creating a physical buffer zone is Israel's tactical goal, how does that actually land in Beirut, especially when the government there has virtually zero control over Hezbollah's military apparatus?
It puts them in an impossible position.
Which brings us to the decision makers. In Lebanon, the government's position is one of profound institutional paralysis. Prime Minister Nawaf Salam has publicly condemned the attacks, defining the infrastructure destruction as collective punishment.
While at the same time, Lebanese President Joseph Aoun is making this intensive push for diplomacy. He's desperately trying to find a viable off-ramp to halt the airstrikes on the capital.
But across the border in Jerusalem, the calculus is entirely different. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has stated his mandate is to totally dismantle Hezbollah's military infrastructure south of the Litani so displaced Israelis can return home.
And you have intense friction within the Israeli cabinet itself, which complicates things further.
Oh, absolutely. You have Defense Minister Israel Katz warning of expanded strikes on Beirut, claiming U.S. backing for the moves.
While National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir is taking a completely maximalist stance. He's openly opposing any ceasefire at all and demanding the complete leveling of Hezbollah strongholds in Dahiya.
And layered over all this regional friction is the intervention from Washington.
Right, the international diplomatic push.
Right.
U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has been aggressively brokering a step-by-step de-escalation roadmap.
Which really culminated when U.S. President Donald Trump announced a mutual cessation of hostilities on June 2nd.
Yes. The intelligence reports indicate President Trump is highly frustrated with the prolonged military tactics. He's specifically pushing to halt the strikes on Beirut to prevent further civilian casualties.
And to mitigate international diplomatic isolation, presumably.
Exactly. That's a major concern for Washington.
But here is where the mechanical failure of diplomacy actually happens. I mean, how is Rubio's step-by-step roadmap supposed to work if one of the primary combatants refuses to participate?
It can't. And Hezbollah's leadership has flatly vetoed any partial ceasefire.
Right. They demand the full, unconditional withdrawal of Israeli troops from southern Lebanon before they will even consider stopping their fire.
Which brings us back to your opening thought about the negotiating table.
Exactly. We talked at the top of the deep dive about a sovereign state being unable to negotiate its own peace. Let's look at this like a corporate structure.
Okay, let's hear it.
The Lebanese government is like a corporate board. The president and the prime minister have the fancy titles, they sit in the boardroom, and they officially represent the company to the world.
But Hezbollah is a minority shareholder.
Right, a minority shareholder that just happens to hold all the bank accounts, the passwords, and the security keys to the building. The CEO can sign whatever contract they want, but if the minority shareholder refuses to unlock the door, nothing happens. It's like a three-legged stool where one leg just refuses to touch the ground.
That structural analogy explains the gridlock accurately. The Lebanese state is intact on paper, but practically speaking, it is strategically subservient.
And the mechanism of that subservience is Iran, isn't it?
Yes, Tehran has spent decades building parallel infrastructure inside Lebanon. We're talking about funding schools, hospitals, and paying salaries, not just supplying weapons.
So they're deeply embedded in the society.
Deeply. Hezbollah's veto power is derived from this deep-rooted socioeconomic and military network. Furthermore, Tehran has issued explicit warnings that expanded Israeli strikes on Beirut could trigger a full-scale regional war.
So Hezbollah's veto is really a local lever being pulled as part of a much broader Iranian strategic calculus.
Precisely.
Now, here's where it gets really interesting, because in modern conflict, the battlefield isn't just physical, it is digital.
The information space is just as crucial.
Yes, and this is where the capabilities of Stylo News provide us with a completely different vantage point. By synthesizing over 250 global news sources and analyzing social media sentiment in real time, we can track the information war just as accurately as the troop movements.
And the data streaming from social media, particularly X, reveals a highly volatile public square. Under hashtags like #Lebanon and #Beirut, the dominant sentiment is overwhelming civilian terror.
Yeah, users are posting raw, real-time footage of drone strikes and building collapses. It's incredibly visceral.
It is, but we are also tracking two deeply entrenched dueling narratives designed to influence international policy.
And we are reporting these narratives with strict neutrality just to understand how information warfare functions in this space. On one side, there is an aggressive, pro-Israel digital campaign.
And these accounts frame the military strikes strictly through the mechanism self-defense.
Right. The core argument is logical from a state security perspective. No sovereign nation can tolerate thousands of rockets displacing its civilian population, making the neutralization of Hezbollah a non-negotiable imperative.
Conversely, the pro-Hezbollah and anti-escalation networks are generating massive traffic condemning the operations as disproportionate aggression.
They focus relentlessly on the civilian death toll.
Yes, the civilian toll and the destruction of sovereignty. They frame Hezbollah's missile strikes as a justified resistance mechanism against an invading military force.
But, how does a policymaker, whether they are sitting in Washington, Beirut, or Jerusalem, actually navigate this?
It's incredibly difficult.
I mean, when you look at this digital feedback loop, how much of this #Beirut anxiety is organic exhaustion from terrified civilians, and how much is algorithmic amplification driven by bot networks trying to force a political outcome?
What's fascinating here is that intelligence platforms like Stylo don't just read the hashtags. They analyze the velocity of the posts to separate organic panic from coordinated digital campaigns.
Oh, wow. So they can see the artificial spikes.
Exactly. And both exist simultaneously. But for decision makers, this digital theater serves a highly practical function. It is the diplomatic stopwatch.
The diplomatic stopwatch. Explain that.
Well, public endurance dictates the military timeline. A government can only sustain a kinetic military campaign until the social media blowback creates so much domestic or international pressure that allies are forced to pull their support.
Ah, I see.
So the digital sentiment data tells generals exactly how much time they have left on the diplomatic clock before they are forced to halt operations.
Which brings us to the immediate horizon. If you are listening to this briefing right now, what is the timeline and what should you be watching for? Lebanese President Aoun mentioned a very fragile 24-hour implementation window for a ceasefire framework.
Right. Based on current data, we are tracking 3 objective courses of action.
Okay, let's hear them.
Scenario A is de-escalation. In this pathway, the pressure mechanisms work. All parties, including Hezbollah, formally accept the U.S. roadmap.
Which would result in what?
A phased withdrawal of forces and a heavily monitored border.
Okay, but given Hezbollah's veto power that we just discussed, that seems mechanically improbable right now. What is the alternative?
The alternative is Scenario B, sustained attrition.
So the ceasefire fails entirely.
Exactly. The framework collapses. We see a continuation of the tit-for-tat strikes, prolonged mass displacement, and Israel physically cementing a permanent, heavily fortified military buffer zone north of the Litani River.
And the escalation pathway, the worst-case scenario.
Scenario C is regional war. This is where a catastrophic miscalculation occurs.
Like what?
Say a Hezbollah rocket hits a densely populated Israeli center, or an Israeli strike targets a high-value asset in a civilian sector of Beirut. That triggers an uncalibrated retaliation that draws Iran directly into the kinetic conflict.
From an intelligence perspective, what is the single definitive tripwire here? I mean, what is the specific indicator that tells us the situation has tipped irreversibly from a manageable, localized conflict into a full-blown regional war?
The intelligence assessments point to a very specific geographic red line, and that is Dahiyeh.
Beirut's southern suburbs.
Yes. Continued or expanded strikes deep into those suburbs represent a direct threat to the center of gravity for Iran's proxy investment. The scope of the strikes on Dahiyeh, combined with the nature of the Iranian response, are the mechanisms that could instantly shatter all containment protocols.
It's a remarkably delicate balance.
It really is. And as we conclude this briefing, it leaves us with a fundamental strategic question to ponder.
Go ahead.
When modern conflicts are negotiated not just between sovereign nations, but between states, heavily armed proxy groups, and global superpowers, does the traditional definition of a ceasefire even apply anymore?
That's a great question.
Right. Or have we entered a new era of perpetual, carefully managed, low-level warfare where the concept of peace is permanently replaced by heavily armed pauses?
That is definitely something to think about. As a reminder, all of the intelligence, the timeline, the sentiment analysis, and the strategic forecasting we discussed today were generated entirely by the Stylo News application.
It's an essential tool.
It really is. Stylo News is an incredibly powerful AI-driven app available for both mobile and desktop. It allows you to customize your own personal intelligence-style briefs, drawn from hundreds of traditional news sources, as well as real-time data from platforms like X.
It's literally enterprise-level intelligence right in your pocket.
Exactly. Subscribe to Stylo News to get AI-powered news on demand by visiting www.stylonews.com. And make sure you tune in later this week. Join us this Friday for the Stylo News Intel update. Our strategic debate topic will be East Africa.
Looking forward to that one.
Me too. So what does this all mean? Well, first of all, it means the world is incredibly complex, and having the right tools to understand it is more important than ever. I'm going to drop the 1960s news anchor persona now to just say a huge, genuine thank you for spending your time with us on this deep dive today. We really appreciate you choosing to get informed with us.
We absolutely do. Thanks for listening.
We would love to hear what you want us to cover next. Please reach out, request topics for future deep dives. Be sure to follow Stylo News on your favorite social media platforms. We started today talking about a corporate board trying to sign a contract while a minority shareholder holds the keys to the building. As you watch the events in southern Lebanon unfold, watch who is actually holding the pen and who is holding the keys. Think about that as you read the headlines this week. Stay informed, stay curious, and we will see you next time.